People should note on this graph, the axis on the left is the annual family income. And down here at the break point is $50,000. And any family that makes less than $50,000 over a whole decade, the period from 2002 to 2009, their income has decreased. Beginning at $45,000 to $50,000, it's gone down 1.9%. And there's only one point between $35,000 and $40,000 when it went up 3.1%. But now look at up here over $50,000. As you go up, and I'll try to get out of the way here, it's almost off the graph. And up to 79% for those making over $100,000, $100,000 to $125,000, their income has gone up 79%, almost 80%. And that's compared to a minus almost 2% for those in the $50,000 range. And almost all of us are down below this $50,000 point. So it's only the...
Well, half of us. At least half of us.
At least half of us.
Yeah.
But how many are up here in the...
Well, in the way top, you're not going to have many. I mean, half of Vermonters literally live down here. Okay, so a half. And then I would guess that, you know, another 40% live kind of in here between my hands. And then you have very few at the top.
So the very top now is $1 million a year income, and over a decade their income increased 62.8%. And now the second one is $500,000 to $1 million a year, and their income increased 65.5%, and that's where Governor Shumlin is. So it's kind of hard, it's kind of easy to understand that psychologically he might be a little bit have a feeling that maybe taxes should go lower.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of political considerations to balance. He is way out in front on health care, as you and I know, and I hope we'll talk a little bit about. He is pretty aggressive about renewable energy and some of those issues. So, you know, from his point of view, he probably shouldn't be out in front on all of these issues. So he's going to pick and choose to some degree. And Democrats hate being labeled a tax and spender. So he's trying to avoid that, try to get a little more experience under his belt as governor. You know, I think there's a lot of considerations anyway that go into his opposition to increasing taxes on the wealthiest. That said, most people seem to agree that next year's federal budget that's being debated right now in Congress is going to be way worse than what we're seeing now. And the federal budget has a lot of implication for state budget because they give us funds and match funds and generally help us deliver services. So if the bottom falls out on that, we have an understanding anyway that Vermont's not just going to let the bottom fall out, that we'll have to look to make those programs whole or at least keep them from declining dramatically. And at that point, I hope you'll see an increased appetite from the governor on down around this tax fairness that we're talking about, or around asking wealthy Vermonters to contribute more. I should say there are other ways too. It's not just the income tax. There's like we see in Washington, there are wealthy Vermonters and corporations that don't pay any tax, that are able to work their way out of owing income tax. So Senator Tim Ashe proposed the idea of a minimum tax for people who are at the higher end of the spectrum to make sure that they can't avoid any income tax payments to the state. I'd like to look at revenue from corporations and see how many of them are doing very well but not paying state income tax. You know, so there are a number of ideas, little ideas like our nickels that when we redeem our soda bottles and beer bottles, you know, we all pay a nickel when we buy those products, and if you bring the empties back, you get a nickel back. But when those nickels, when the bottles don't come back, right now those nickels are going to Coca-Cola. And there are many states that say, no, 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 no. Those nickels belong to the people of Vermont, so they come to the state. And we could do that in Vermont. That would generate $2 to $3 million a year. That's pretty effortless. I'm not lying in bed worrying about Coca-Cola's bottom line. I don't think they need little tip from us. So that would be a small change that would generate some revenue. I've advocated that commercial enterprises that are taking Vermont's water to put it in bottles and sell around the country, around the world, ought to be paying us a tax because they're taking our water. We've established that groundwater belongs to the people of Vermont, but we don't have a tax policy that recognizes that. There are at least 1 or 2 springs in Vermont that pull our water out, put them on trucks, and send them to Massachusetts to put in bottles and sell. I find that to be a disturbing idea in a lot of ways, and so I've advocated that we should be taxing them on a per gallon basis, something like that. That could raise some revenue. There are a lot of ways we can raise revenue that I think most people would think are reasonable. But taxing the wealthy and the income tax has to be the foundation of that to me. The income tax raises a lot of money and is maybe the most principled tax in terms of aligning tax policy with the person's ability to pay. But we'll see. Maybe, we'll keep talking about several ideas and 1 or 2 of them will stick. That's the legislative process.